What's going on, y'all? We are back with another episode where we're reviewing some of the major headlines that have been taking place over the last week. Now, a few headlines that we're going to be talking about are the current state of immigration in the U.S., as well as the fraud scheme that was found in Minnesota that involves the Somali community and why they've been under fire recently, as well as Representative Ilhan Omar. Now, to start us off, in terms of immigration in the US, we currently have around 20 million illegal immigrants that live here, and it costs taxpayers around $182 billion each year to foot the cost. Now, recently in Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, they increased the funding that ICE receives, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, from about 10 billion to just under 30 billion dollars each year. As you can tell, it costs the US 182 billion dollars to foot the cost of illegal immigrants, whereas the services that we have to mitigate the illegal immigration costs about $30 billion each year. So it seems like a wiser investment to make into ICE. And just under the Biden-Harris administration from the last 4 years, there were nearly 4 million illegal immigrants that receive Social Security cards, which then enables illegals to receive a driver's license. It enables them to register to vote and to vote. Something that's, plaguing the country has been fraudulent schemes within our election system, where now illegals are being given the opportunity to vote in elections, and in some cases altering the outcome of elections, whereas United States citizens aren't able to have their voice heard in the same way. And it was only back in 1995, so we're only talking 30 years ago, when Bill Clinton gave a State of the Union and had one of the main focuses on the issue of illegal immigration. And this was recently played in the House of Representatives by a Republican to go and expose how the left has gone so far outside the realm of reality.
Believe just the opposite of what President Clinton just said. You believe in open borders and complete chaos. Did you notice the bipartisan support in the chamber? As the video was played, everybody was clapping.
To where now they're not only promoting illegal immigration, but considering those who are against it as something other than human. They've had all sorts of insults to call people. They're calling people fascists and Nazis if they oppose illegal immigration and they want to do something about it. And it really just goes to show how far the Democrats have gone in their ideology, to where they've completely left behind the citizens of the country to represent people who broke the law to come here. And you've got people all over the world who are dying to get into the US and going through all the necessary processes in order to do so, and they're being cut in front of by people who skip the line. And a large percentage of those people are coming from South American countries, which begs the question, well, why don't they just go to other South American countries and Central American countries where they can escape the conditions of countries like Venezuela, Haiti, certain parts of Mexico run by cartels? Why don't they go to other Spanish-speaking countries with a higher degree of shared culture and just come to the US? Well, these other South American countries have very strict immigration policies, and they don't want to be taken advantage of by people who are seeking refugee status. But then, of course, we just had 4 years of Biden Harris, who left the border wide open. Uh, and people see that as a chance to come and get free services, to get a free education, to get free healthcare, all things considered. Because again, in South America, you can't just illegally immigrate into another country and absorb their welfare systems. But again, here in the U.S., if you're a Democrat, you think people who have that view are fascists and racist and xenophobic is the new popular term, which is of course crazy that people are being prioritized who came here illegally over the citizens who are already here. Um, Regardless, the Trump administration has recently halted immigration from 19 different countries around the world, and some from various regions, from the Mid-Atlantic, Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela. We're not accepting immigrants from those countries at this moment. From West and Central Africa, you've got Sierra Leone, Togo, Equatorial Guinea, and the Republic of the Congo. In North and East Africa, Libya, Chad, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, and Burundi. From the Middle East and Central Asia, Yemen, Iran, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan. And in Southeast Asia, Myanmar and Laos. So those are the 19 countries that we've halted immigration from entirely, legal or illegal. We're currently not accepting people from those countries. And if you were to dig deeper into the way some of these countries function and operate, it would become more and more obvious why that's the case. And the reason that the Trump administration is pointing to when issuing this order is following the National Guard member who was recently shot and killed by an Afghani who came here under the Biden-Harris administration. And so that's the current state of affairs when it comes to immigration, though there is one country that I would like to highlight, which is a country that has been placed in the forefront of the discussion lately, being the country of Somalia. And just to give a bit of a profile, what the country of Somalia looks like today. They've got a GDP per capita of $637, according to the World Bank in 2024, which makes Somalia the seventh poorest country in the world, again, measured by GDP per capita. Somalia has a Human Development Index of 0.404, which is the second lowest in the world, only ahead of South Sudan. On the Perception Index, they score 9 out of 100, which makes Somalia the second most corrupt country in the world, again, only ahead of South Sudan. And on Freedom House, a site that scores countries based on things like democratic institutions, individual freedoms, all things considered, they score 8 out of 100, which is among the lowest in the world. A little bit of history in terms of how Somalia got to this point. They faced civil war not too long ago, and for about a decade, the country was left without a federal government. And it wasn't until around 2000 did they implement what's called a transitional government to get them to the point of having a permanent federal government. However, during that time of them using this transitional government, the country was in large part controlled by insurgent groups, and there was very little control through central authority. And it wasn't until 2012 did they have a federal government reestablished and they held a presidential election. Uh, some more background, Somalia is over 99% Muslim, which again gives you an idea into the culture and the traditions that would be found in that country. Uh, and again, how it relates to the US, because we've been seeing, the Somali community has been at the forefront of attacks in the news recently. And so why is that the case? Well, the highest concentration of Somalians that live in the US are in Minnesota, specifically in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan, and more specifically than that, within the 5th congressional district of Minneapolis. Now, the representative for this district is a woman by the name of Ilhan Omar, who is a Somalian refugee who came to this country. And she's been under fire recently by the Trump administration. There's been allegations that in her immigration process, that it was a fraudulent process, and again, there's allegations that she had married her brother in order to gain status as an American, which these claims have people have supported them, people have opposed them, and there hasn't been anything concrete to prove one way or the other whether or not she married her brother in becoming a citizen. If that is the case, and she did commit immigration fraud to come to this country, there are a range of punishments that the federal government can impose on that person, which range from heavy fines to time in prison and even deportation. And the Trump administration, Trump himself, has very much hinted towards the idea that he would like for Ilhan Omar to be deported back to Somalia. And, again, a very interesting situation that we'll see how all of it unfolds in the time to come. Something else that Ilhan Omar has been uh, shouldering the blame for, and has come into question, is her net worth, which as recently as 2020, she actually had a negative $65,000 net worth. And only in 2024 has her net worth gone up to $30 million. Well, how can this be the case? Well, there's a few reasons for it. Someone on a congressional salary of $174,000 per year before taxes, what that probably ends up maybe around 125,000 just off the top of my head. And living in Washington, D.C., chances are most of that money gets spent. So there wouldn't be any possible way for her net worth to go from negative 65,000 to $30 million in 4 years. Well, what's interesting about politicians is they have a campaign fund where they're able to receive donations from whoever it is that chooses to donate. And in her short political career, she's raised over $18 million in donations through her campaign fund. Now, her campaign fund has then gone and spent over 50% in what they received on political consulting from her husband's firm. In 2020 alone, she spent $2.9 million, which was about 57% of what she brought in that year, in consulting through her husband's firm. So a huge percentage of what she's bringing in donations is going directly to her husband. Now, her husband is also the owner of a handful of businesses. He's got ownership in some companies, which then accounts for the rest of Ilhan Omar's net worth. So that's kind of how she was able to make that huge of a jump in such a short amount of time, is by funneling money to her husband and his businesses. Now, furthermore, again, when it concerns the Somali community within the US, um, and again, in Minnesota specifically, there was a huge a case that had been released regarding fraud within various welfare systems in Minnesota. There's been, and this story broke actually a couple years ago, but has really been put back into the forefront of the discussion right now. There were about $1 billion that had been claimed as fraudulent that was issued through the federal government to fund programs within Minnesota, and again has ultimately been deemed fraudulent through investigation. Organizations that are notable within this fraudulence is what has been called Feeding Our Future. Now, Feeding Our Future was an organization that was taking in government money to then go back and deliver meals for children. However, they were receiving this money and then not fulfilling their obligations to then deliver those meals. Now, what did that money go to? Well, it was funding the lavish lifestyle of various figures within this fraud scheme that was being donated to different politicians around the country and very specifically within Minnesota. To name a few, Omar Fateh, a state senator, received money from this organization. Jacob Frey, the Minneapolis mayor, received money from this organization. Jeremiah Ellison, a member of the Minneapolis City Council, received money from this organization. Ilhan Omar, again, a congressional representative, received money from this organization. John Hoffman, another state senator, received money. Keith Ellison, the Minnesota Attorney General. So you can see there's people all over the state in some of the most high-ranking positions of power that were receiving money through this fraudulent scheme, ultimately stealing money from taxpayers. And a lot of these organizations are very deeply connected to the Somali community, which again is why they're in the crosshairs of the discussion right now, is people are seeing the Somali community in such a negative light that they're questioning whether or not these people should even be coming to this country. Because you can see the country that they're from is intensely corrupt, it's intensely poor. I mean, it's just not a country that anyone would want to live in. And so they've now come over to the US and have found a hotspot within Minneapolis. And now their community is at the forefront of carrying out fraud schemes against the government. And so that's why you see Somalians are under fire right now, and specifically Ilhan Omar is under fire as a person who's seen as the leader of this movement of Somalians in the U.S. And for good reason, because they've committed fraud and they're being held accountable. And the questionable practices of Ilhan Omar, just as the representative of these people who hasn't demonstrated the most ethical behavior, then goes to show that the community at large is probably not the most ethically driven. Again, considering the conditions of the country that they're from, what it is they know, and then they come over here to the U.S. and they continue the same lifestyle. And well, there you have it. That's been what's been happening in this last week. Some of the discussion surrounding the Somali community, surrounding immigration, and I hope I was able to give you some insight into these issues. My name is Brett Cody Fornatoro. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I hope to see you again next week.